My name is Evelyn Mason. I'm 60 years old. I've worked in the insurance business my whole life. 40 years in the industry. And 30 of those at Summit & Company, the oldest insurance firm in Chicago. Every morning, I arrived at the office by 8 a.m., always a little earlier than everyone else. Poured myself a cup of coffee into my favorite mug, the one that says one claim at a time. Checked reports, called back clients who didn't get their paperwork the day before. I knew everyone by name. Their kids, even their dogs. I was never late, never called in sick, never complained. I just worked. Not for bonuses. Not for recognition. I worked because I believed that doing your job well mattered more than making noise about it. And then Jared Taylor walked into the office. Young, ambitious, perfect haircut, shiny smile. 32 years old. The new branch director. From New York. Not a single day of experience in insurance, just a culture and efficiency manager. And so, here I am, sitting across from him. Tuesday, the 10th of October, 9 a.m. It all looked like a normal meeting bright office, glass walls, a folder with my name on the desk. I even smiled when I walked in. Then he started talking. Evelyn, thank you for coming in. We've been thinking a lot about our structure and the direction we're heading. The company's moving toward a more dynamic model, and he pauses, breathes in, smiles again. We need more flexibility. Younger energy, a new working style. I listen, I hear every word. But I don't understand. He says I've been incredible. That I have a wealth of experience. That no one doubts my dedication. And still, unfortunately, we're letting you go. Summit & Company thanks you for your service. Today will be your final day. He says it with a smile. As if he's handing me a cruise ticket, not erasing 30 years of my life. I don't cry. I don't roll my eyes. I just sit there. He hands me an envelope. Here are your papers. Final signatures. Last paycheck. You have 10 minutes to gather your things. HR will assist you if needed. And then his final words. I remember them word for word. It's time for the younger generation. Please understand it's not personal. Not personal? How is it not personal when you give 30 years to a company and they toss you out like old office furniture because someone decided they wanted more energy? I took the box. Packed my photos, my mug, my planner, and a note from a client. Thank you for saving my family from financial ruin. I'd kept it in my drawer for years. I walked through the hall, and no one looked up. The employees I had trained. The ones who used to come to me for advice, who once said, we'd be lost without Evie. They turned away, pretended to check their phones. Not out of disrespect, but out of fear. Because they knew tomorrow it could be them. I stepped outside. The October wind from Lake Michigan whipped through my hair. It was chilly, but I didn't feel the cold. I just stood there on the sidewalk, box in hand, in the middle of downtown Chicago, a city where I knew every building, every corner. And for the first time in years, I felt empty. No schedule, no routine, no to-do list for the morning. Just one question in my mind. What now? I was a 60-year-old woman. Without a job. Without thanks. Without a goodbye. I was erased in a single meeting. Because it was time for the young. And right there, in the cold morning wind, I made myself a promise. This is not the end. When I was 30, I joined Summit & Company as a regular secretary. It was 1993. Bill Clinton had just taken office. We still had fax machines and bulky Apple computers that hummed like spaceships. I remember how nervous I was during my first interview. I wore a cheap suit from JCPenney and held a notepad, scribbled with phrases like, I'm a fast learner. All I wanted was stability, a place to settle in. And I stayed for 3 decades. At first, I made coffee, answered phones, ran around the building with printouts. Then I started filling in for customer service reps when they went on vacation. And eventually, I stayed in that department for good. Became a specialist, then a senior, then a department manager. I didn't rise through connections, I didn't have any. My parents were school teachers in Peoria, Illinois. They spent their whole lives saving to put me through Northern Illinois University. Failure was not an option, and I didn't fail. With each passing year, I dove deeper into the business. I studied every policy down to the last comma. I didn't just know our clients, I knew their lives. When Mr. Bennington's restaurant in Naperville burned down, I was the first one on the scene to help him rebuild his paperwork. When the Lopez family lost their son, and their policy had a filing error, I didn't leave the office until we secured their payout. I was never just clocking in. I lived this work, and I mentored the younger staff. We had an unspoken rule. Ask Evelyn first. Before the first call. Before the first big case. Before the first hard decision. I didn't give lectures. I simply showed them how to do the job right quietly, without fanfare. People respected me. I could feel it. I even got awards. A whole drawer full. Employee of the Year. Customer Excellence Award. Mentor of the Quarter. But then, things started to change. At first, they stopped inviting me to the morning strategy briefings. I thought maybe they'd forgotten. Then I heard it was a new structure. Then they moved my desk out of the center of the office into a corner next to the server room. It wasn't bad, exactly. But it was different. Quieter, more distant. Then they stopped asking for my opinion. Even the ones who used to come for advice stayed silent. People began saying things like, "You've done your part. Let the younger team take the lead." And I did. I shared. I guided. I stepped back. But inside, a strange feeling started growing, as if everything I had built was slowly being erased. Not aggressively, not all at once. Softly, politely, through process optimization, through new approaches. But I knew, if you're no longer invited where decisions are made, then soon, no one will ask you about your own future. And I was right. The first morning after I was let go started at 5:45. My alarm went off, just like always. I got up, just like always, made myself coffee with almond milk, and sat by the window with my folder of papers. Except, as it turned out, there were no more papers. Silence? Not the usual kind, not cozy, homey silence, but something threatening. Normally, at this hour, I'd be checking emails, sorting client inquiries, drafting a to-do list. Now, I just sat there. Summit and Company already felt like some distant dream, though only 12 hours had passed. I caught myself thinking, what do I even do with this morning? With this day? With myself? My son called from Florida. "Mom, you've earned this break. Just imagine you can finally just be yourself." A friend messaged me from Chicago. "Now you'll have time for yoga, books, travel." And I just stared at the wall, trying to figure out where I belonged now. Where I was needed. A week later, I started looking for work. I put together a resume, updated my LinkedIn profile, signed up for job alerts on Indeed and Glassdoor. I wasn't expecting a miracle, I just wanted to be useful. To work. Not in some high-powered position, just doing what I do best, understanding people and helping them. I sent out over 30 applications that first month. And you know what I kept hearing back? Almost every reply had some version of the same phrase. "Your experience is truly impressive, but unfortunately, you're not the right fit. We're looking for someone more flexible with modern workflows. We're seeking candidates who align better with our youthful team culture." I even rewrote my resume once, removed the years, tried to mask my age. But during the interview, they could still tell from the look in their eyes. Polite sympathy. And within minutes, a goodbye. For the first time in decades, I realized I had become invisible. Not because I'd failed. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but simply because I'd crossed some invisible line, the one where women stop being seen as an asset in the workplace. And the truth is, I'm only 60. I'm not sitting in a rocking chair. I'm not knitting socks or feeding ducks in the park. I know how to build a team, how to negotiate, how to retain $1 million client. But instead, I'm sitting in my living room in Aurora, Illinois, drinking my third coffee of the morning, staring out the window, watching young people rush by with laptops and earbuds, as if I'm no longer part of the picture. It's like someone unplugged me from life. And the worst part? No one even thought to apologize for it. A month passed. Or maybe 2, I stopped keeping track. The days blurred into a dull routine. Coffee, job boards, short walks, and the constant feeling that the world had completely forgotten I once meant something. Then, one of those gray Thursdays, my phone rang. The screen lit up. Mary Rodriguez. We'd worked together back in the 90s, in the old office on Lake Street in Chicago. She was the kind of accountant who could silence an entire conference room with a single glance, but with a heart as warm as a Thanksgiving apple pie. "Evie, come have coffee with me. I'm dragging you out of your cave, please." Her voice was warm and firm, and somehow exactly what I needed. An hour later, we were sitting in a cafe in Naperville, just around the corner from the Barnes & Noble we used to sneak into during lunch breaks. Same Mary, only now in a bold red scarf, tablet in hand, eyes sparkling like always. "You look like someone wrung you out and tossed you aside," she said bluntly. "But I know that look. I've been there too." I nodded. We both knew what it felt like to be quietly erased from the room, all because we didn't fit into some shiny, new corporate image. "I thought I'd retired," she went on. "But then I got bored." You know what I did? I shrugged. I started a blog, taxtalkwithmary.com, tax tips for small businesses. And guess what? I've got over 1,000 subscribers now. Some even pay for private sessions. It's not millions, Evie, but it's mine. I feel like I'm steering my life again. I smiled, though part of me was skeptical. "Mary, you've always been a numbers wizard, but me? I just managed clients, built teams." She leaned forward and tapped me right on the forehead. "You didn't just manage clients. You knew their stories. You held deals together when everyone else was bailing. You're a volcano, Evie, they just capped you off. You didn't burn out, you're just waiting." I didn't know what to say. Volcano sounded dramatic, maybe even ridiculous, but something deep inside me stirred. She was right. Everything I'd done for 30 years didn't vanish. The world may have stopped seeing it, but that didn't mean it was gone. She looked at me with the same calm intensity I remembered from our old office days. "Maybe you don't need to look for a job. Maybe you need to give yourself one." I left that cafe with half a cup of coffee and a head full of ideas. That night, I sat down at my computer again, but not to send out more resumes. This time, I started writing. What do I know? What can I teach? What's in my head that could help young founders, startup teams, customer success managers? I didn't know where it would lead. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. Maybe Mary was right. I'm not done. I've just entered a new season. And this time, I get to write the script. You know what the scariest button on a keyboard is? Post. When you're about to write, especially your first post, your hands suddenly feel like they don't belong to you. And the voices in your head start shouting, "Who cares? You're not an influencer. You're a 60-year-old woman, freshly retired." But one Tuesday morning, I pressed it anyway. I'd woken up at 6:30, an old habit my body hadn't unlearned yet. Brewed my coffee, opened LinkedIn, and typed, "How I learned to talk to difficult clients without losing myself." No top 5 tips. Just a real story. About the time I closed $1 million deal, not because I pushed hard, but because I realized the client wasn't stressed about the budget. He was scared. His daughter had just been admitted to the hospital. Sometimes the best move isn't to pitch. It's to listen. To be human, I hit post, closed the laptop, and took my dog for a walk. No expectations. An hour later, 34 notifications. By the evening, 1,200 likes. By morning, over 100,000 views. I thought it was a glitch. Something had broken. But no people were reading. And not just reading, responding. Comments like, "Thank you. This reminded me why I got into sales. I'm new to client management. Your experience is gold." You have no idea how much it means to hear this from a woman with your background. And one that stopped me in my tracks. "I'm 57, got laid off last year, thought I was done. Thank you for proving we're not alone." I cried. Because for the first time in months, I felt needed. I wasn't some relic. I was a living story. And if my journey could save someone a year of pain, give someone direction, or inspire someone not to quit, then I was doing something that mattered. The next week, I wrote another post. Then another. What young managers don't realize until they lose a key client. After my third post, I got an email from a college in Austin. "We're hosting a leadership forum. We'd love for you to speak." Me? The woman who was let go for being too seasoned? Now a speaker? The world hadn't changed. I had. I stopped asking for permission. I stopped trying to fit in. I just shared what I knew. And somehow, that was enough to reclaim my place. This time, on my own terms. It happened almost by accident. I got invited to dinner by a couple of former colleagues, Caroline from marketing and Josh from sales. We met at a small restaurant in downtown Denver, the Blue Olive. We ordered wine, risotto, and I settled in, expecting just a nice evening of small talk. But the conversation quickly shifted toward work. "Evie, you wouldn't believe how things have fallen apart," Caroline said, rolling her eyes. "The new folks? Smart, sure, but they can't talk to clients. It's like they're scared of them." Josh chimed in. "Last week, one intern opened a client meeting with, 'Yo, what's up?' I nearly spit out my coffee. This was an $800,000 contract, mind you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. And then I felt a small, unexpected twinge. Because I know how to do that. I've done that. For 30 years. What if, I started, not even sure where I was going. What if what? Josh set down his glass. What if I created an online course, not some boring lecture, a real one? Stories, mistakes, real examples. I'd call it something like, The Art of Client Service from a Battle-Tested Veteran. Caroline froze, then smiled. Evie, I'd buy that. And I don't buy anything except yoga memberships and wine subscriptions. On the Uber ride home, my mind was racing. You know that kind of energy that keeps you up until 2 a.m.? That was me. I opened my laptop and typed, Course idea. Clients aren't the enemy. People work with those who understand their pain. The next morning, I dug out my old iPhone XR, clipped a white bedsheet to the wall, grabbed my IKEA desk lamp, and told myself, Start. With what you have. Where you are. However you can. I recorded the first module in my living room. In a bathrobe, with a coffee mug off camera. I looked into the lens and said, My name is Evelyn Brooks, and I'm here to teach you how not to screw up your first client meeting. This wasn't a polished masterclass with glossy graphics. It was the truth. I talked about the time I called a client Jim all day until he finally said, My name's Brian, actually. I shared how important it is to call back, even when you don't know what to say. How silence in a conversation isn't a failure, it's a space for respect. I posted the video on YouTube open to all. No ads. Just to see if it resonated. A week later, 9,000 views. 2 weeks in a comment from a manager in Chicago. I just added your video to our onboarding for new hires. And then an invitation to speak at an online conference for customer success managers. No agents. No producers. Just me. And an IKEA lamp. What started from pain and feeling invisible was slowly becoming a mission. I used to think a new chapter begins was just a pretty metaphor. But there it was on my laptop screen. Congratulations, your course is now live on Udemy. A few days later, another notification, and sli-.n.ins. LinkedIn Learning has approved your course. It's now live. I was literally standing in my kitchen wearing an old Starbucks t-shirt, milk foam on my lip, staring at the screen like it was a ticket to space. I didn't know where it was going, exactly. But I knew one thing, I wasn't going back. The first 50 students signed up on Udemy within 3 days. The comments were modest. Solid content. Not overloaded. Felt personal. I heard my mom's voice in yours. Then 100 students. Then 300. By the end of the month, 2,000. 2,000 people decided my perspective was worth listening to. Among them, people from Bank of America, Allstate Insurance, Verizon, even someone from Delta Airlines. I saw the names on the list and thought, wait, they're training their teams with my videos? Then one morning, I woke up to a strange email notification sent to the inbox I used only for the course. Subject line: Corporate License Inquiry Summit and Company. I nearly dropped my phone. Summit and Company. The same company I'd worked at for 30 years. The one that showed me the door because of my age. Where Jared once said, without flinching, "It's time for the younger generation." I opened the message. It was formal. Dear Miss Brooks, we came across your course on LinkedIn Learning and found it valuable for our client-facing team. We're exploring a corporate license. Would you be open to discussing terms? I sat down on the couch. Just sat there. No sound, no thoughts. For 5 whole minutes. Then I laughed. A real, full laugh, the kind that bubbles up from deep inside. Because how could you make this up? They fired me. And now they wanted to buy my brain. I replied the next day, briefly. Yes, corporate access is available. Standard license for a company your size, $9,800 annually. Thank you for your interest. Evelyn Brooks. No discounts. No emotions. Just numbers. If there's one thing I've learned in these past few months, it's this. My experience has value. And it's time the world paid the full price. A week later, they bought the license. You know what the irony is? They had this big talent refresh initiative. And now? The training plan for their shiny new hires is written by me. So here I am, sitting in a Denver cafe, sipping a latte, and thinking, life has a funny way of coming full circle. You can be nobody on Monday, and a mentor to an entire corporation by Friday. The same world that once told you you're too old might one day be forced to admit, you're a legend. We just realized it too late. When I got the invitation to speak at a conference in New York, my first thought was, spam? Subject: Annual Future Work Summit Vertical Bar Panel, The Generational Gap, When Experience Beats Trends. The email looked official, signed by the organizers. We'd be honored to have you as a speaker. Your course has been a revelation for the industry. Your voice matters. I reread it 3 times. My voice matters? Just 6 months ago, I was asked to quietly pack up my office. No drama, please. Now, I was being invited to speak on stage, in front of the top leaders in the customer experience world. Of course, I said yes. The Hilton Midtown Ballroom on 6th Avenue looked like something out of a movie. High ceilings, massive stage, rows of crisp white chairs, bottled water with customized logos. My name tag read, Evelyn Brooks Founder, Evelyn Talks CX. When the host introduced me, he said, she's the voice of a generation many tried to write off. She proved one thing loud and clear, dismissing experience as a mistake. Please welcome Evelyn Brooks. I walked on stage in a navy blazer, standing tall. My heart was racing, but not from fear. From something else? The deep knowing that I belonged there. I opened simply. When I turned 60, I was told I was too old. That it was time for fresh blood. It sounded like a sentence. But here's what I've come to realize. Experience isn't clutter. It's the foundation. You don't build a house on TikTok trends. You build it on something solid. And that's what I want to share today. Somewhere in the second row, I saw Jared. Quiet. Wearing a Brooks Brothers suit, iPad in his lap, eyes down. Maybe he hoped I wouldn't notice. Maybe he hoped to blend in. But I saw him. Of course I did. I didn't say his name. I didn't even look directly at him. But every word I spoke was a reply to his words from 6 months ago. It's time for the younger generation. Nothing personal. Well, now it was personal. And public. After the panel, people came up to me. A woman from Oracle. A manager from American Express. An HR director from Wells Fargo. You were speaking right to me. Thank you for reminding us we're still valuable. I'm sharing your course with my entire team. Then a young guy walked up, maybe late 20s. You're like a legend, Mrs. Brooks. My mom follows your blog. You're kind of her hero. I smiled. After 30 years working in the shadows, to be called a legend, that's not just flattery. That's justice. And Jared? He left early. No goodbye. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he just didn't want to hear how the woman he once labeled outdated became the voice of the entire industry. But I don't hold a grudge. Because the applause in that room? It wasn't for him. It was for me. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd make the Forbes list, I probably would have just laughed and gone back to making my oatmeal. But here it is. Black and white photo. Headline: Women who redefine the rules after 60. And underneath it, Evelyn Brooks, founder, Evelyn Talks CX. When I saw it, I cried. Not loudly, just quietly to myself. Because I remembered the day I stood by the elevator, box in hand, as Jared said, "You've been incredible, but it's time for the younger generation." Turns out, time comes to those who don't quit. After that conference in New York, everything snowballed. My course started being recommended inside Salesforce, JP Morgan. Even a company in the Netherlands licensed it for 400 employees. I'd sip my morning coffee and see emails with addresses like at ubs.com, at deutschebank.de, at hsbc.co.uk. That's when I knew it was time to grow. I launched a podcast, The Experience Age. Each week, I invited veterans from across industries. A woman who spent 20 years at Delta Airlines and taught me how to calm down furious passengers. A former Chicago cop who spoke about trust during crisis. A retired Texas schoolteacher now helping schools build better relationships with parents. The podcast hit the Apple Podcasts Business and Leadership top charts. Then I got quoted in Harvard Business Review. People were finally listening. One day, I got an email from a startup in Austin. Young founder. 27. His name was Nick. He wrote, "We're building a customer service tool for health tech. We're young and we don't know everything. We need someone who can teach us how to talk to people. We need you." So I flew to Austin. They had the whole cliché. Brick loft, bikes leaning on the wall, a $15,000 espresso machine. But not a clue how to deal with a furious patient who got the wrong diagnosis because an algorithm glitched. I spent 2 days with them. We ran simulations, dissected real complaints, talked about what it means to stop hiding behind scripts. When I left, Nick said, "Now I understand what responsibility means." Thank you, Evelyn. Back in Denver, I started building a team. The first person I called was Michelle. She worked under me at Summit & Company 15 years ago. When I called, she said, "Evie, are you serious? I'll quit my job tomorrow." Now she's my COO. Then 2 more former colleagues joined. We're not just a team. We're like a kindness mafia. I'm no longer past working age. I'm a brand. And not because it was easy. But because I refuse to let someone erase 30 years of my life, today my calendar is booked out 3 months in advance. But I always keep Monday mornings open to make coffee. And remember how it all started. A box, an elevator, Jared, and a smile that now belongs to me. Yesterday, I got a letter that brought tears to my eyes. It was from a woman in Oregon. Her name is Margaret. She's 64. She wrote, "Dear Miss Brooks, I've spent my whole life afraid to make changes. But after reading your story and watching your course, I decided to start my own business. I'm 64, but you gave me the courage to begin. Thank you." Letters like that, they make all of it worth it. The late nights, the self-doubt, the uphill battle. That's when I realized my story isn't just about getting fired and bouncing back. It's about this. It's never too late to start over. And that realization led to something bigger. I launched a foundation, Second Wind. It's dedicated to funding and training women over 50 in digital careers and entrepreneurship. We offer free online courses in marketing, coding, project management, with a focus on practical skills, real mentorship, and real confidence. Because no one should feel pushed out of the game just because of their age. When the foundation launched, people started writing to me. "Evelyn, you're the icebreaker cutting through generations of stereotypes. Thank you for showing us the way. You've proven that experience isn't baggage, it's a superpower." I don't chase fame, but recognition matters. Because it means our generation is finally being heard. Recently, The Atlantic published a story about me. The headline read, "The woman they fired at 60 and regretted it." But the article wasn't just about me. It was about the thousands of women like me. Women who were written off, but still have fire, creativity, and purpose left to give. Sometimes, I imagine 20-year-old Evelyn reading that article. And I'd tell her, don't be afraid. Don't let anyone define you by your age. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. Your experience is your strength. Use it to change the world. Today, I'm not just a successful entrepreneur. I'm the voice of a generation that stayed quiet for too long. And I know, the best chapters are still ahead. So here's how I want to end my story. Age is not a sentence. It's an invitation to begin again. 2 years after that fateful dismissal, I was sitting in a small cafe in downtown Chicago. The sun was shining on a busy spring day, students, business people, tourists all around. I was enjoying my coffee and checking my emails on my phone when I noticed a familiar figure approaching the table across from me. It was Jared, the same young director who once told me, "We need fresh blood." Now, his face looked tired, and his eyes lacked the confidence and arrogance they once had. Without asking, he sat down and began. "Evelyn, hi, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm no longer with Summit and Company. The market's tough. Companies want something new, and me, well, it's just been hard finding a job lately." His voice was different, not cold and dismissive, but tinged with vulnerability, maybe even regret. I looked at him and smiled because I knew now I held the keys to my own destiny. I pulled out my business card from my bag neat, with my course logo and contact info, and handed it to him. "Jared, if you want to change your story, I invite you to enroll in my course. Life lessons aren't always easy, but it's better to learn from others' mistakes than to repeat them yourself." He took the card, a little stunned, and thanked me. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out. Outside, the warm breeze and city sounds greeted me, and I felt calm, confident, and truly happy. That moment became a symbol, not just of triumph over injustice, but of a new chapter where experience, wisdom, and resilience bring real power. I knew for certain many new horizons awaited me, and no age or bitterness could ever stop me. I was fired from Summit & Co. because I was too old. Jared said they needed fresh blood, but you know what? Age is not a drawback. It's a huge advantage. When you lose everything, when doors you thought were always open suddenly close, that's when you start living for yourself. I stopped trying to please those who didn't see my value. I started listening to myself. Today, I teach. I sit in a classroom and see the eyes of my students bright, eager to learn, wanting to become better. We laugh together, discuss real situations, and make plans. Traveling, meetings, new projects, I'm doing things that once seemed impossible. And here's what I've realized. Some call it age, but I call it strength. The strength of lived years, the strength of experience, the strength that helps you face change without fear and keep moving forward. While some think it's all over, that it's time to leave the stage, I'm just getting started. Because real life isn't about the numbers in your passport, it's about the fire inside.